120 years after Jesus is gone. That's what the scholars. So if you want to go with those scholars,
Dan,
and by the way, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Mine says, at the beginning of verse 9, it says one authentic Mark's gospel, and then before, let's see, hang on.
Yeah.
And then there's another authentic. So there are like two authentic.
Cool.
One
What kind of Bible do you have there? What study?
Contemporary English version.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Good.
They both added around 250.
That's a very good question. And I don't know, how similar are they? Are they very similar or are they quite different? Does one, the real question is, they have this stuff,
similar, yeah.
do they have this stuff about poison and snakes and tongues, and so these signs will follow those who believe they will?
One's just like 2 verses.
Gotcha.
One's several verses.
Gotcha. Okay. That's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to that. This is the one that has the sign stuff in it. That's the one I know, that I'm familiar with, and that's the one that the scholars say is probably too fit. Now, I'll tip my hand and tell you what I think. I think that ending is probably not the original, and it was probably added about 250 AD. Now, so all of my anti-Pentecostal friends go, yeah, that's right. See, so we shouldn't base any theology on those verses. That's what they say. We shouldn't, because it's a spurious text. We should not build theology on a spurious text. Okay, and here's the fun part for me. If I ever get in a really good argument, God seems to be preventing me from doing this. There's probably still too much meat in me. But the upshot of it is exactly the opposite of that. If this passage was added in about 250 AD, see, when I was a black belt cessationist, that means I thought all the gifts had ceased, all the supernatural sign gifts. I was a typical modern seminary trained, Baptist boy. I somehow, I didn't ever really put this in words, but I somehow imagined some nasty old Pentecostal getting in there about 250 AD to make his point, his erroneous point, and writing this ending. Now, if I'd have put it in words, I would have gone, wait a minute, that's preposterous. That's ridiculous. But I never quite put it in words. So what it turns out, so all my friends at Dallas Theological Seminary, the fountainhead of dispensational cessationist in the Western world, all of my friends at Dallas Theological Seminary say, you can't base anything on those verses. They're spurious. They were added 250 years later. And I would say, that's right. What does that tell you about what the church believed in 250 AD? Follow me? So what we have here is one of the earliest commentaries, not only on the New Testament, but what we have here is one of the earliest church commentaries on the sign gifts.
What was the norm?
What was the norm? Because if you read John MacArthur, bless his heart, bless his heart, bless his head. If you read John MacArthur, he'll give you, Jesus said the gifts would end. Well, not Jesus, but Paul in 1 Corinthians 12, where there are tongues, they will cease. The Bible tells us they'll cease. They did cease. History shows us that they ceased about 125 AD, roughly after all the John and all the apostles had died. And history shows that there is no continuance of the supernatural sign gifts. That is the party line that I preached vociferously for decades. Okay? And here is, right under their noses in Mark 16, is this commentary saying, no, in about 250 AD, this was the norm. This was what Christians believed. Do you hear me? And again, so I'm going back to James 5, is why did James say this? Because he was writing the Word of God? No. He said it because this is what happened.
It's reality.
Yeah, it's reality. Charles?
This one notes the commentary in my Bible. It said that many scholars question about this authenticity of 9 through 20, primarily because of the omission of these verses in some of the earliest manuscripts, because their style is somewhat different from this Mark. However, Christian writers of the 2nd century, such as Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and
Tertullian?
testify of the inclusion of these verses in earliest translations, such as the Latin, Syriac, and Coptic all include them.
Yeah, yeah. So there you go. Then you're kind of entering into that debate between the experts about whether the manuscript evidence supports it. And is that Spirit-Filled Life Bible?
It's a Spirit-Filled Bible, I think.
Yeah, yeah. See, so that would be that would fit with the commentators, the editors of that Bible to say. But on the other hand, and I agree with them. I agree with them. It probably is. It may be spurious. We don't really know. But whether it was or not, it was held to be normative. It was normative to the people who lived there. Okay, question? So, thank you for letting me take that detour. I feel a lot better. That's off my chest. Are you with me? In the early church, this was the norm. This is what happened. Then, of course, we're left with the question, has it been the norm throughout the history of the church? And the answer has been only in small pockets. There have been places and times throughout the history of the church when supernatural manifestation was the norm. We are not exactly living in one. At least most of us aren't. Yes, Chuck?
So this dovetails with what we talked about, that in those days they believed in miracles. And they saw miracles on a regular basis. These days, there may be miracles, but because we don't necessarily believe that they exist, we don't see them.
Kind of, although may I pick on your words just a
Please.
little bit? That here, I think you're technically correct, but where a lot of us go with that is we think that old people in the past were more ignorant than we are, superstitious, and they believed in miracles. That's the part of the modern mythology is that the farther you back you go in time, like the less modern people are, the more ignorant they were. So it's one of the pillars of modern thought that primitive people don't know the difference between normal and miracle. And you see, the whole Monty Python, the Holy Grail,
Right.
Typical kind of thing. That people in the past were ignorant, and so they believed in miracles, quote unquote. So I don't want to go. I don't believe that at all. In fact, anyway, it's almost the opposite is true. They lived with their toes in the dirt because that's where their food came from, and they knew life and death. Here in our culture, most of us are not usually present when people die because they're in a hospital or something, and we're pretty safely removed. And when we kill our animals to eat them, we don't kill them, so roast beef comes in plastic. They knew the nuts and bolts of the material world. They knew what was supposed to happen. I don't know if you've heard that, the liberals. In fact, let me back up just a little bit, just to help educate you a little bit. In the modern milieu, in the modern world, there were kind of two camps. There were the conservatives and the liberals. The liberals said the supernatural, we don't believe the supernatural really at all. It was just all superstitious. They didn't cross, the children of Israel didn't cross the Red Sea, a big wind came up, it was really the Sea of Reeds. It was just a swampy area, and it happened to have a dry summer, so they all got through, and then the rains came.
That's exactly what I was taught about in Old Testament class at Marion College.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And every miracle in the Bible was explained away. People didn't understand. They didn't really know about sperm and eggs. So the idea of a virgin birth was like conceived, like whoa, virgin birth, which is ridiculous. Anyway, so there was the liberals, and they didn't believe in the supernatural, and then there were the conservatives that were hanging forth that miracles actually happened, but they only happened back then. You see? So that was the conservative position. So back to, if I may then, back to James. So I guess the question is obvious, isn't it? How do you get yourself, if you want to? And one thing's for sure, when you have somebody that you love who is gravely sick, you want to be a believer. So let's answer that question. How do we get ourselves into a culture of believers? How do we get ourselves